My guest this morning is Jane Adas, who working together, but she's the lead person, that's why we have her, with my colleague Michael Adas, who's taught in the history department with me for many, many years, so some of the students know him, but you don't necessarily know Jane Adas, so let me introduce the lead person involved for many, many years in the plight of the Palestinians in Israel and occupied territories. They're called various things. We'll get at that. But let me begin by asking you what got you involved, and how far back does this involvement go? I know you a long time, and I can't remember when you weren't involved.
When I was in college at the University of Kansas, I had a Palestinian roommate, and that did it. I knew nothing. I did not know that there was no Palestine, that Israel had replaced Palestine. I did not know anything about it. And I think I spent the rest of my life trying to atone for that ignorance. I knew what most Americans did know, Exodus, the struggle for, a safe haven for Holocaust survivors, but I did not know what happened on the other end. And my friend Bushra, her family, most of the Palestinians who were in what became Israel were forced out, 80% of them. It was ethnic cleansing. Bushra's family stayed. They managed to stay, and they still lost everything. They were what's called present absentees. Kind of Orwellian, but they could not return to their home. They could not get their property back. They were under military rule until 1966.
And so you have visited any number of times. When is the first time that you...
I didn't really go until 1992.
Okay.
When I met my roommate in Jerusalem. She has since died.
I see.
But I did meet her.
So she was living in East Jerusalem?
She is from Haifa.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She was a movie star.
Oh, wow, that's quite something. As you know, in this course we emphasize very much the impact of the visual. Mm-hmm. And so I was taken in two little pieces that you've written that I have assigned to the students, only the cover of the Inside H2, because I think that this is just such a wonderful thing. The students will read it, but I'm going to just repeat it here. What did you see? The inspector asked you. Well, that's wonderful to me. See, your eyes are dangerous. You could have seen something that you're not supposed to have seen. And then you answer with your usual rambunctiousness. I don't have to tell you. You took pictures. Well, that's a dangerous thing to have done. And but you kept a diary. Now, a diary is obviously a very traditional piece of historical evidence, and as historians, we're very comfortable with going through that kind of stuff. But we're not as comfortable with images. It's as if they manipulate and distort, but I want you to... So you took pictures. You took pictures like every tourist just takes pictures of things or of people, and what did they matter to you? And I've got... They're behind you. We'll swing the camera around eventually. Take a picture of these albums that you've got of stuff. Going back to, I guess, to 1992.
That was interesting, leaving. It's difficult leaving Israel. I have never had a trouble going in, but leaving, it's very difficult. I've been strip searched, more than once. But that was
Which is also a matter of seeing and feeling.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Rather than listening to what you say.
But this is interesting because an Israeli peace group had given me a brochure, Know Your Rights at Ben Gurion Airport. I put it right on top of my bag. They opened the bag, saw that, closed it, go. That was that particular trip.
Mm-hmm. And then in the more recent article that I also have the students reading, and again, I just want to, it's just a wonderful line to me, and you're a good writer, so that's all fine, but it's, you say, finally we saw for ourselves conditions in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Tell us about why it's important to see for yourself. And I want to press a little, so you don't trust other people's pictures, or you don't trust what other people say. The greater impact of seeing?
Well, there could have been a greater impact had the press... We in the whole world were not allowed images of Gaza after Operation Cast Lead. Reporters, Israel would not allow reporters in. So no photos came except through Al Jazeera, which we have been taught not to trust. So to see what had not been portrayed in the news about that particular attack was, it's really incredibly moving. I was there 2 months afterwards, maybe 3 months after it
Maybe
was
you ought
over.
to stop a second and tell the students Cast Lead. I'm not sure
Operation
everybody knows.
Cast Lead was Israel's assault on Gaza, really unprovoked. There had been a ceasefire since October, I think, of 2008. Israel broke the ceasefire by going into Gaza and killing and arresting some people. There were then a couple of rockets after that, and then Israel just invaded. And they invaded, can't remember the exact dates. It was 3 weeks. It was right after Christmas of 2008, up until January, maybe 17th or 18th, before Obama got inaugurated. So it was in that period when they left. That was Cast Lead.
Okay.
There were, 1,400 Gazans killed.
And it's right after that that the greater restrictions are placed. Because I know you mentioned that you had to go through Egypt.
Oh no, before that, but much before that. Gaza has been under lockdown almost since before the Oslo Accords. You know, there's a huge fence around Gaza. Israel controls every opening. They control the sea. There was an airport built by the European Union, I think. Israel bombed it before Cast Lead. Cast Lead was just an intense attack, one of many less, every couple of years Israel attacks Gaza. But the destruction here had to be seen, or at least had to be photographed, which it was not.
Your music to my ears had to be seen. So reading
really
about it's not good enough, right?
No, I don't think so.
It doesn't have enough impact for you.
But at least if there had been photos, if there had been anything from that side. There was one Norwegian doctor who gave interviews, who managed to get in and gave interviews, Dr. Mads Gilbert. And Al Jazeera was on the ground. Other than that, nothing was coming out of Gaza. Instead, there was a hill in Israel where reporters could watch it, near Sderot, which receives the rockets from Gaza. And they were picnicking and cheering, and this was going on, within, down at the bottom, this destruction was going on. It was incredible.
Talk to me about Al Jazeera. I'm interested in what you said. Don't trust. Come on.
Al Jazeera was the first non-state-controlled media. It comes from Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
They do own it, but they have reporters every place. I think, you get really kind of it's not unbiased because everything's biased, but you get a different point of view than you would get from, say, Fox News or CNN. You get on-the-ground reporting with some sympathy.
So you're more comfortable with their reporting than with whatever else?
I think you need to combine them all to get the right picture, because there is always bias.
That's true, and that's a good piece of advice for our students, but they don't always have time to look at everything.
They don't have access. Al Jazeera has just opened Al Jazeera America, which won't touch this. They can't. Al Jazeera English couldn't find an outlet in the United States, or find very many. Now they have Al Jazeera America, which just doesn't cover the Middle East, really.
I want to interrupt, because one of the things the students are reading is a little piece by Susan Sontag, which is related to images, particularly of prisoners, Abu Ghraib, and things like that. But I don't want to ask you about that, but the story you told me is so great that I just want to hear it again. So tell us about Susan Sontag and visiting.
Okay, well, the group I was with in Hebron repeatedly, I went many times, is Christian peacemaker teams. And these are, it's a peace group that the idea is that you get in the way where there's violence. They're not only in Palestine, they're also in Chiapas, Mexico, they're in Iraq. But the idea is that you kind of get in between fighting groups and try to prevent the violence. They're very, very well-meaning, very naive. And Susan Sontag contacted the group. They're very Christian. Contacted the group and said, "I'd like to come to Hebron, and could you show me around Hebron on Sunday?" And the group had never heard, whoever talked had never heard of Susan Sontag and said, I'm sorry, we don't do tours on Sunday.
That is amazing.
And what an effect that would have had. You know, because people don't come to Hebron much. Do you know about Hebron?
Yeah, well, say more.
Yeah, Hebron is, I think, the first or second largest city after Nablus in the West Bank. And it has maybe, I'm not sure the population, 200,000 Arabs, and living in the center of Hebron, maybe 400 or 500 settlers right in the center, guarded by maybe 10,000 soldiers and military police. So it is, and these settlers are ideological settlers.
Well,
they're there.
I mean,
they're not all. No, I don't think they all are. I think some of the settlers are there economic. They make it very inexpensive. They're heavily subsidized. But in Hebron, they're ideological. So most of our work was trying to get in the way of settlers harassing Palestinians. You know, in Hebron. So Hebron is tense, always. You know.
One of the reasons I wanted to ask you about Susan Sontag is my larger sense that the Palestinian cause has not been terrific at the use of images. When I think, which our students will look at, if you think back, I'm old enough to remember it, the 1964 campaign against Goldwater, which had the little girl plucking the daisies. That's a powerful image. If you look at the image of the naked little girl in Vietnam, firebomb, that's a powerful image. We have for the students a couple of images that you took, and they're good, they're what you could photo. But and we also have the Suarez book that you let us have a look at, which is wonderful. Although I won't have the students do all of that, but I think that the Palestinian cause has not won the battle of the images and of reportage more generally.
You know, speaking of the images, you know Tiananmen Square, that's another famous image. Well, there is one of a Palestinian boy, you know, with a tank right here, you know, rock like this. There is an image like that. Have you seen it?
Yes.
You have?
But I have, absolutely. I think
but I mean,
it didn't, that's my point. It doesn't
get out. Now, I don't know if that's the Palestinians' fault or if that is Western media's fault that open discussion on this issue is not encouraged.
Let's talk more about that. So on the ground, we've got the powerful government force of Israel controlling who can take photos of what.
That's right.
Okay, so that's and with more success, shall we say, than is the case with, say, the United States Army in Afghanistan, which seems unable to control what reporters take pictures of, and which opened up really, going back to Vietnam, those were not authorized photos, obviously,
That's right.
that we looked at. So there's greater effective control on the ground by the side that doesn't want to see.
That's right.
You to see the opposite. There is also a very effective use of imagery, frankly, when there are bus bombings in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. Those are very effective and with great bloody vigor shown, both in movie clips and in still clips. And then we're adding yet a third level, which is the international media, which for various reasons doesn't wish to emphasize in front page these things. So am I right in that general assessment of?
I don't think it's the Palestinians' fault that their images
they're
are
not good
getting
picture
out.
takers.
No, you know, not that they don't have good things to photograph. I mean, you know, effective things, they certainly do. But as you say, they can't get them out. And they're not, you know, I'm surprised you saw the picture of the boy with the tank. And did you know he was killed, you know, within a year after that?
No, I just, it's an image that's on the internet, and I saw it in preparation for this whole session that we're doing, and that's why I
mean, if that boy,
said yes right
if at Tiananmen Square, you know, we would have known all about him. You know, there would be follow-up, but we don't know about that boy.
For me, it's just an image that I saw.
Yeah. And I think it's, you know, there are many reasons. I think there is a general sympathy, I think, in the United States, genuine, for Israel because of the Holocaust. And not just because of the Holocaust, because we're both, you know, settler colonial societies that have done bad things to the people who were here. We have that in common, right? We have shared values. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the Palestinians one place I went with CPT was to South Dakota to be with the Lakota Sioux, because I see a real parallel between what we did to Native Americans and what is happening to the Palestinians. And it was, there are losers in history. Justice doesn't always happen. You know, justice has not happened. They're disappeared, they're out of sight, and this is what Israel wants to happen to the Palestinians. Forget about them.
Okay, tell me more about how historians, you can call it right the balance or present an alternate picture. The visual evidence is against they're doing this successfully in some ways.
I think things are changing. I think there are more questions. You know, I think that support for Israel, I think it's greater in Congress and in the media than it is among people. I think people do, even though they're not given the whole story, I think they have a feeling like this isn't really right. You know, it isn't really fair. I think the support is wide and thin. And things like cast lead. I mean, enough information got out that, wait a minute, the death toll is 1,400 versus 9, of which 3 of those were friendly fire. Wait, you know, this isn't fair. Or the Mavi Marmara, when they attacked the ship at sea. You know,
yeah, I recall.
The flotilla going to Gaza. Things like that do get out. When they attacked Lebanon in 2006, you know, and left all of those landmines, which are still exploding, that information does get out. And, you know, it's cumulative. I think people are beginning to see that, you know, wait a minute. It's not a question of good guys, bad guys, you know, white hats, black hats. It's more, you know, more subtle than that.
Mm-hmm. One of the people who agrees, 2 of the people who agree with you about the power of images and who controls them, ex-President George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld. For other kinds of reasons, of course, in which you're...
They'd like to suppress some images, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. What does that do to the kind of cause that you're working on? Here I want to be fair, but, you know, we've got your article on Code Pink, okay? Playgrounds for kids, I guess it's worthwhile, but well-meaning, but how effective?
I think it matters. You know, I think every little thing matters.
I mean, pink is a color. You picked that. You didn't call yourself yellow.
Oh, I'm not part of it. They sponsor the delegation.
I'm
not part of it.
But you
still,
went with.
But still, they're doing things, and you know, she's new. Medea Benjamin, who founded Code Pink, she's new to this situation, and people like that are wonderful. They're still full of energy. They can't believe what they're seeing, you know, and they come back and act. And I think that's great. I don't think any little thing is too small. You know, we would get really discouraged. Frankly, every time I went to Hebron, the situation was worse. Every single time. And this last time...
Isn't that still true now? I mean,
yes, oh, absolutely. I mean, I last went almost 3 years ago. If I went now, it'd be worse. But that time, it's complete apartheid within Hebron. Complete. You know, but when we get discouraged, when on the team we get discouraged, you say, well, who ended apartheid in South Africa? You can't say any one person did. It's a cumulative thing of all of these things, and I think there will be, what do you call it, a significant mass that I think things will change.
So some tipping point.
I think there will be.
You're still an optimist.
Yeah, I am. I do see positive things. I mean, the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement which was called for by Palestinian civil society. Since governments are occupied territory, ours in particular, you know, civil society is doing things, and they're having some incredible successes, much faster than they did in South Africa. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask students to follow up on some of your examples, particularly with the Native American population in the Dakotas. I think that's a very interesting thing. One of the things we do in this course is to have students do research projects of their own that pick topics that we're not using. So we're doing Palestine, we're doing Bayou Tapestry, but there's lots of other war and significance of imagery that matters in us. So I think we're going to.
One of the Lakota, you know, I was there over the 4th of July when they were very afraid that that's when people, locals, you know, from Pierre, South Dakota, come and kind of trash their place. You know, and, you know, they said, you know, we are a defeated people. Can you imagine feeling that way? Can you, you know, we are a defeated people. That's
very true.
It really is, you know, and much of, they are in prison all the time, you know, much of what I was doing in the brief time, I was only there 3 weeks, was visiting in prison for nothing. And this is very parallel too.
Absolutely.
You know, to Palestinians who are imprisoned without charge, under administrative detention. It's the parallels are really frightening, and there I feel less optimistic.
For sure.
Yeah.
Tell me about the power of the speed of the image, of the internet. You know, one of the great differences between the Bayeux Tapestry is by the time it was actually woven, everybody who had anything to do with it was dead.
Yeah.
And it's true that it lasted hundreds of years, and that Adolf Hitler liked to go look at it. It inspired him to be a tough military person and so forth. So did Napoleon. But anyway, now we have this instantaneousness. And I'm not sure it's worked as effectively as it might.
But it is a difference. I mean, this is one thing. People no longer have to depend on cable TV or the New York Times to get their news. You know, so this is another thing that's kind of weakening the structure of that particular oppression. There are websites, Mondo Weiss, I really recommend that, by Phil Weiss, who was on the trip with me to Gaza. The electronic intifada is indispensable for finding out what's going on there. And you'll read things there that the Times wouldn't touch. You know, the Times does such funny things. Like a couple of days ago, a young Israeli soldier was stabbed on a bus. We get that in the Times. You know, you get the picture. You get the picture of the bus, the grieving family, everything. Like, this was, how did they call it? A break in the relative calm. Well, if that week alone, 3 or 4 Palestinians were killed, 3 in Gaza, 1 in the West Bank, no mention. That's what relative calm is. Palestinians die, and Israelis don't. You get the full story of that soldier who was stabbed. It's terrible that he was stabbed, you know, but why is one life more significant than the others?
Well, and who has the power to send the images that fix that in your mind.
But you will read about the Palestinian deaths on the Electronic Intifada and on Mondo Weiss. I really recommend those 2 websites.
Okay.
And there are more.
Well, great.
Yeah.
We'll ask students to explore some of these additional websites. And I'm also going to ask students who feel that the Israeli side is not properly covered. That's my version of balance, is that I have people who are clearly, you know, where they stand, and that's certainly the case with you. So I think we want to thank you very much for this discussion, which has been very fine, and carry on with your optimistic work.
Okay, thank you, Rudy.